leaders responsible for key decisions?
Look, I think it's very difficult for me to be predicting what the outcome might be, and by necessity, the question which you're entitled to ask really calls for me to predict what the outcome will be, and that process is not finished, and I will wait, and I would ask that we all wait to see that final report.
Has there been any evidence presented so far that's come as a surprise to you?
Look, Lundy, I'm appearing tomorrow, and I don't think it's appropriate for me to be providing a narrative. There'll be a time for me to do that, and I will do so in my typically clear and frank way, but I don't think that's appropriate to do that now. The evidence must first be considered by the inquiry, and they must draw whatever conclusions they believe are appropriate, and me being a commentator on that evidence I don't think is helpful or, in my judgment, appropriate. What I would say, though, clearly mistakes have been made in this program. There's no denying that. That's why the inquiry's been set up, and I think we should allow the inquiry to do its work rather than presupposing where they will or won't get to.
Victorians want to know whose idea hotel quarantine was. So far, the inquiry hasn't answered that question. Do you expect to answer that question tomorrow?
My only expectation tomorrow is to answer all the questions that are put to me. That's what I'll do. As to what I'm asked, that's not a matter for me. That'll be a matter for counsel assisting.
Is that a question you're able to answer? Do you know the answer to that question?
Well, I will provide answers to any and all questions that are asked of me tomorrow by the inquiry.
But that's a simple question. Can you at least tell us whether or not you can answer it? Do you have that information?
Well,
do you know
Rachel, I'm not here to answer questions that the inquiry will put to me. They're matters by their very nature. They're matters that the inquiry may or may not put to me. And to be honest, it's not even, I think, appropriate for me to speculate on what they may or may not answer, lest that be seen as me inviting them to cover certain material or not. That is entirely a matter for them, and they will construct and determine what they ask and the manner in which they ask it. That's the nature of an inquiry of this kind.
Premier, we've now seen the Prime Minister's letters to you in July. He wrote 3 times in the space of days offering ADF support. Why do you think he was so urgent in offering that?
Look, everything about this pandemic is urgent. The letters in July follow requests that I made in June, and a regular correspondence, whether it be by phone, by messages, or indeed
the Prime Minister was personally writing to you. The difference here was the Prime Minister was personally writing to you a number of times in a space of days. Why were you reluctant to receive ADF support? Well,
you see, that's the conclusion that you've drawn, and I don't think you can fairly draw that conclusion. I made requests in June, and indeed earlier than that. I've made many, many requests, and I'm pleased to say that they've all been answered. And that's why we've got, I think at my last briefing, we've got more than 1,000 ADF troops on the ground here now, doing an amazing job. So I think it is both inaccurate and unfair for you to infer from those letters or anything that's occurred any reticence on my part.
How can you say that that is inaccurate or unfair when we've heard time and time again that people in your ministry have forgotten, they don't remember if the ADF was offered? Had the Health Minister say it, Police Minister, Chief Health Officer, list goes on. No one seems to remember it. So how is it fair that you would say...
I'm not entirely sure what you're referring to by virtue of...
that the ADF was offered support?
We're talking about July. We're talking about July.
We're talking about in general whether the ADF was...
Well, whether you're making a general... Well, hang on. Whether you're making... Let me be really clear with you. Whether you're making a... whether you're inferring in general or specific terms reticence, that's simply not accurate. That is not my view. That is not my position. And if it were my position, specifically or broadly, then we'd hardly have 1,000 ADF, and we've had up to, I think, 1,500, something like that, doing all manner of work. And I think if in relation to the letters I'm asked about, I think I've already taken, I don't have the documents in front of me, but I think I've already taken all of you at some length to the breakdown of those, and I think you've been taken to that most recently. So I don't think those comments are accurate. We're very grateful, and all requests that have been made have been based on need, and they've been responded to. And I've spoken with Commodore Hill on a number of occasions. I may have to speak to him again about different things. It's a very positive relationship and partnership.
Well, let's go more specifically then. June 24, Andrew Crisp requested ADF support. The next day, that was then rescinded down to only a couple hundred. The Premier just a week later, the Prime Minister rather, just a week later, started this series of letters offering more support, which one would assume you were reluctant to take the fact that he kept offering this.
No, I don't think you can assume that at all. There are many different letters that come. There are many different... They're not the only letters the Prime Minister's written me, nor I him. Plus phone calls, plus messages, plus meetings. And I'm not quite sure how many National Cabinet meetings we've had across the journey, but many. I'm in regular contact. My ministers are in regular contact with their counterparts. My officials are in regular contact, so I wouldn't draw that inference at all.
So why did Andrew Crisp then rescind that request to follow?
Well, I think he's gone directly to that matter in the process that I've just referred to. I've already answered that question from this podium, and I don't propose to add to that answer.
So did you accept the offer of ADF support from the first letter that the PM sent you?
Oh, look, I'd need to check. These things are... letters come in. They usually follow requests that
Three
have
in
been...
a row, though.
Well, again, I think you're drawing conclusions, and you're free to do that, but that freedom doesn't mean that you are right, and I'm indicating to you that you are wrong.
What was the testimony?
Much, and I think that's pretty consistent with the fact that I took you all through these matters when I made the requests in June, which is before the letters, and the troops have arrived, and they're doing a great job, and we're deeply grateful to them. It's nothing more or less than that.